Greetings from time and space, fellow listeners. This is Amanda Portelli bringing you another story. Not from the heart of the TARDIS, unfortunately. I'm still working on that, but from the heart of my very own office. And this week we have a fantastic author here today to talk to us about her love of Doctor Who, how Doctor Who can help you be a better writer, and her own experiences as a writer in the science fiction, horror, and paranormal field. Thank you, and would you please introduce yourselves for us?
Hi, I'm Jen Frankel. I'm the author of a series of horror novels set in Toronto about Maggie Stewart, and I've got 2 books out, The Last Rite and The Red Ring.
Brilliant. Tell us about those books, please.
Well, they're a series of horror novels. There's going to be 4 altogether. They're about a girl who starts off at age 13, is when we first meet her. So we see her first in public school, and the second book takes place in high school, and then I'm just going to kind of keep her aging. It's about a girl who experiences early on what it's like to have incredible magical powers. And she actually becomes kind of a pawn in an ancient power struggle because one of the participants in this power struggle believes that her powers can augment his. And I love to deal with a lot of misdirection, make you think twice about the characters you're reading about. And I love having unique kinds of magic that you haven't seen before.
What inspired Maggie?
Well, it was actually a dream I had when I was about 13 years old, so this goes back a hell of a long time now. But I had a dream that actually has become one of the centerpieces of the novel, and I probably shouldn't tell you too much about that. But they because I don't want to spoil.
From conception, that being the first time you put the pen to paper, to the finished published product, how long did that take you?
Oh, that's really scary. I actually, didn't finish the first draft until I was in my 30s, and then the second, I had an edition that kind of came out just casually for some friends in 2002 of the first novel. And then finally, I had what I considered a perfect draft last year. So it really honestly took a disgraceful amount of time to get it to the point where I was happy with it enough to actually publish it. But the second one was out within a year, and I expect to be a lot faster writing from now on.
So that length of time, did you ever get discouraged?
Constantly, I would say. Not discouraged about the book itself, but it was just more discouraged about life. It was very hard to keep writing because life was so difficult. But I never once believed that I wouldn't get the book finished.
I know a lot of our listeners are writers or are creative in some faculty or another, so since we have you on the air today, can you tell us what advice you could give them?
Read. Seriously, read. If you're wanting to write movies, don't just watch movies, actually read screenplays. There's no better teacher. There's never going to be a better teacher than you reading and actually evaluating what you're reading. And for storytellers especially, I would say if you want the best education you're ever going to get about how to write a story, go back and read fairy tales. Read Grimm's fairy tales. Read anything classic that and especially like children's stories, children's fairy tales. There's nothing that shows you how to structure a story better in a compact period of time with the greatest impact. And it'll also teach you grammar and spelling, too, which is a very important thing.
Always important components, I would imagine.
Hugely important and very hard for a lot of people.
Hear, hear.
It's certainly not something that comes naturally. Grammar and spelling aren't things that come naturally. They really do have to be observed. But the more you observe what you're reading and sort of see the way that sentences are put together and the way that writers you vary sentences order and vary the word order, vary the length of the sentences, the length of the words even, the more you look at that, the better you will actually do when you're putting your own words down.
Fantastic. That's really great advice. Thank you for sharing that with us. So moving on, it's actually talking about different stories and how that teaches you to think in different forms and put pen to paper, which brings us to the topic of our podcast, which is Doctor Who. Now, I understand you're a Doctor Who fan.
I am. I'm a Doctor Who fan from way back, and I have to admit that I have not been a big fan of the Matt Smith years, so I have not been as excited about watching him, and I'm not at all caught up right now. But I started way back when I was a kid, when they used to show the episodes half hour at a time on TVO, and I used to love watching them. And Tom Baker was my favorite Doctor from those years.
Tom Baker, the scarf, correct?
The scarf and the fuzzy hair and
and the
I always kind of thought of him as something like, it was always funny because it was like watching McDonald's commercials, because in those days they had like Ronald McDonald in a lot of the McDonald's commercials. I was always thinking of Ronald McDonald as kind of the kiddie version of Doctor Who, which wasn't as effective, and I never really liked the McDonald's commercials because Ronald McDonald was just like a pale version of Doctor Who.
Now you realize every time me and probably most of the fans who listen to this show are going to see a McDonald's ad, they're all going to wonder if Ronald McDonald's at the time was.
I know. I'm sure that nobody else in the world has ever compared Tom Baker to Ronald McDonald.
You know, I can honestly say that thought never occurred to me, but it's one of those things that now once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Exactly. It's just like you cannot unhear an ice cream truck if it goes through your neighborhood.
You were talking earlier about how reading and watching shows and reading screenplays helps you become a better writer, or whatever field it is you're touching in. Did Doctor Who ever help you at all in that capacity?
I can tell you that the biggest thing that Doctor Who taught me, and I would credit Doctor Who and Star Trek with this, but Doctor Who primarily, what they taught me was that it doesn't matter what the special effects are. It doesn't matter how much money is being spent on the look of a show, because especially back in the days when I was starting to watch Doctor Who, the special effects weren't great. They wouldn't necessarily appeal to people now because we're used to about a higher level of special effects even from Doctor Who. But the thing about Doctor Who was always that the writing was so good and the characters were so good and the actors were so committed that you could just see that as long as you were being really swept into the story by the storytelling and by all the factors that went into making the storytelling great, you never noticed the bad special effects. And the bad special effects weren't a factor in your enjoyment at all. And I would say that that's the biggest thing that Doctor Who taught me. You're lucky when you're a writer, because as long as you can afford to buy a pen and some paper, you have everything you need to write anything you can possibly imagine. I mean, it's the cheapest thrill in the entire world. It's why I don't think I've ever really cared too much about drugs, because I can always come up with something more interesting than a drug trip just by grabbing a piece of paper and a pen.
Okay, well, people who listen to our show know that I am, like you, not the biggest fan of Moffat's era and Matt Smith, but we won't bore them with my opinions. Instead, we will touch on yours. Why are you not so fond about the current Doctor?
Well, it's funny. I actually I find that what happens when I'm not interested in something is I zone out, and I'm a terrible one for not giving a damn if there's a big action sequence. A lot of people really kind of get charmed by, if the things are blowing up and people are hitting each other, they want to watch it and they get excited and they start screaming at the, it's very attractive to a lot of people to watch action sequences. I am so bored of action sequences without any emotional content that I literally just, my mind goes off, and I've actually done the final climax of so many Hollywood films in the last couple of years. I'm really embarrassed to say so, because I know that's where most of the money is going. But that's kind of what I feel like with the Moffat era. It's become so dumbed down that if I'm not being excited by action sequences, by kind of stupid, it used to be that when I watched Doctor Who, I felt smarter. And I actually feel stupider when I watch Doctor Who lately, and that's just unforgivable for me. But more than that, I just literally, my mind goes off when I'm watching Doctor Who, and if I lose attention, then I'm just not interested in continuing to watch. And it's very sad for me, because I really adored Christopher Eccleston when he was on Cracker and other things that he did before he actually did Doctor Who. And I thought he was just such a great Doctor, and I do wish he'd stayed on longer. And then Tennant was just such a breath of fresh air and adorable, and the companions were great, and then I think it was with Moffat that it just started taking this very strange turn where Doctor Who, instead of being about the universe, there was this very narrow story about a guy and his little clique traveling through time, and apparently somehow they were the most important characters in existence. And this was always something you had such a great perspective with the old Doctor Who, that the universe was bigger than him. And he did what he could, but he was fighting an uphill battle. And he wasn't that important. He was a small man who just, because he saw how things went together, he had more of a chance to have an influence than other people. But you always knew that the universe was bigger than him. And when it sort of started to become everybody he met, especially everyone he met coincidentally, ended up being somehow intrinsically tapped in to the actual existence of the universe, it just got a little bit ridiculous. Like, you don't want stories where people's importance is overinflated. You want stories where you are so focused on the importance of what things are happening to individuals that you actually care about them. It's hard to kind of care about a character when you're being told that their existence is the difference between the universe continuing or not. I just found it a little bit unbearable. It was pretentious. It's been pretentious. It's been domestic in a way that I hate. I don't really want Doctor Who to form a family. I want him to do things that are important. I want him to go out and uphold the concept that there's something bigger than us. And when it became about Doctor Who being the most important thing in the universe, which has been the Moffat years, I've just found it really elitist and unbearable. And I think that it's important to keep upholding this idea that science fiction at its best is always about teaching us something important about humanity. And when it stops doing that, for me, it doesn't have any purpose, because I don't care if the gadgets are cool. I don't care if the spaceships are amazing and we've never seen anything like them before. I don't care if you find 7 different ways to kill somebody. It's just not going to turn my crank. And I don't want to belittle the people that do like just being attracted to the spectacle. But it's definitely not satisfying to me, and I don't think it's satisfying at a deeper level.
So do you take that moral lesson to become a better person and self-improve on and inspire your readers to become a better person through your books?
I believe in doing that. I've always believed that if I want to prove that I believe in like egalitarianism, if I believe that the world still remains a kind of sexist, racist place, if I see those things in my day-to-day life, I like to try to present a world where things are shifted more towards the direction I would love to see them. Because I think you do make a huge impact on the world by the world you create. And I really do try to do that. I think that a lot of times when we talk about the concept of strong women or making minorities visible, which is always hysterical because whites are not exactly a majority race in the world. We just pretend they are because that's where we live. But we need to kind of present like Roddenberry did and like Doctor Who did. What Doctor Who did to me was it presented a world where there were women who just did things, and there was no fuss being made about it. And he'd go to a planet where he met like when he brought Leela on as a companion when in the Doctor Who years, and she was this like wild woman who was a great hunter and a bit of a savage, but she was just who she was. We didn't make any big fuss about the fact that, oh my God, it's great to see a woman, blah 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 blah. It was just, you present that as a finished thing, and people just have to accept it because that's the world you're giving them. A lot of times when people want to have female characters, they'll create them they'll put them in the place where they're the most vulnerable and the most a victim. So what you end up doing is you see a lot of stories that are touted as being these great feminist stories, but what they are is a story about a woman who's a total victim getting to the point where she can function at a medium level of success. And I find those absolutely, they just drive me crazy when, when it's a story about a woman who's been raped and she's working her way slowly back to regular life or something like that. And those are the stories we always seem to want to tell about women, where it's not that they're doing well and then they can achieve something. It's that they're being so beaten down that they can finally crawl back to normal life, and we applaud them.
Fantastic. No, thank you so much for putting that so eloquently. We have to draw this interview to a close soon, so I'm just going to say to all our listeners out there that I personally have read Jen Frankel's book, The Rite, and I am currently devouring the sequel to that, The Red Ring, and they are absolutely fantastic. Buy them and you won't be able to put them down. Which brings me to another topic, Jen. If people would like to buy your book, our listeners would like to buy them, where can they purchase them?
Absolutely. If you are an e-reader, I would suggest that you go to Smashwords and look for Jen Frankel, The Last Rite. There you can download it in every format. I think it's about $3. So, and the trade paperback you can get at Amazon. You can get it at Lulu.com. I think you can get it at Barnes and Noble. Please, if you can get your bookstore to order it in, please do. That's very exciting for me when a hard copy goes out to a bookstore, and you should support your local bookstores. The first one, The Last Rite, is actually illustrated, but there's about 10 illustrations by me because sometimes when I get bored of writing, I like to draw. And the ebook does have those illustrations as well.
And do you have a website or a Facebook page where people can go to find out more about you and the book series?
I do. On Facebook, and on Facebook you can just search for Jen Frankel. I can't remember. I think it's Jen.Frankel is like Facebook.com/Jen.Frankel. Otherwise, you can find me at www.jenfrankel.com, JenFrankel.
Well, that was Jen Frankel, author of The Rite and The Red Ring, and many more books, I am sure, in the future. She will hopefully be at Reversed Polarity this November, so if you have any questions about the book series themselves, you can ask Jen yourself. Thank you again for listening, viewers, and I will see you again next week.